Hello, and welcome to the Mechanochemistry discussions. This seminar series is hosted by the NSF-funded Center for Mechanical Controlled Chemistry, or the CMCC. I'm Ashley Martini. The goal of our seminar series is, as always, to bring the mechanochemistry community together. The seminars stream live on the third Thursday of every month at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. They're also available to watch anytime on the YouTube channel. We've had an amazing group of previous speakers as part of the seminar series, and I encourage you to check them out again, available on the YouTube channel. We also have some excellent speakers planned for the upcoming months, and we hope that you will join us for all of them. Before we get started, a few quick thank yous. Dr. James Batiste, the Center Director, Jennifer Belsick, the Center's Administrative Coordinator, Dr. Frankie Antolon, the Center's Director of Education and Outreach, and Ryan Kwok and Ryan Hilsbeck, CMCC grad students, without whom the seminar series would not be possible. Please do continue to follow us on YouTube. We really appreciate your participation in the seminar series. Before we get started, again, a few quick guidelines. The webinar is being recorded. If you have questions, you can either email them to us at cmccdiscussions@gmail.com, or you can post them directly into the YouTube channel. Either way, they will be propagated to the speaker at the end of the seminar. We also would like to hear from you. We'd like to get your feedback on how to improve the seminar. You can either use the QR code here or click the link at the end of the seminar to provide your feedback, and we will try to incorporate all of your suggestions moving forward. Finally, it's my great pleasure to welcome today's seminar speaker, Professor Luis Manuel Frutos Gaite. Professor Gaite is a full professor of physical chemistry at the University of Alcalá in Spain and coordinator of the research group RESMOL. His scientific career has been built primarily around photo-induced molecular processes, with a strong focus on multi-configurational electronic structure methods, various approaches, as well as non-adiabatic molecular dynamics applied to photoactive proteins and molecular photoactive devices. A key part of his trajectory has been the development of theoretical and computational models and their implementation in quantum chemistry software, including contributions such as semi-classical dynamics tools and external force modules. In recent years, he's expanded his research towards mechanical control of molecular processes, spanning both photo-induced reactivity and ground state chemistry, and has led national projects in these directions. Professor Frutos has also served as president of the Photochemistry Specialized Group and is director of the Andres M. Del Rio Chemical Research Institute at UAH. It is our pleasure to welcome Professor Frutos to the Mechanochemistry discussions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Luis Manuel Frutos. I'm professor at the University of Alcalá, and I'm presenting some results that the group has been working in the last, let's say, few years, almost 10 years, and especially focus on the control of excited state processes, but also they involve the ground state properties. So my university, University of Alcalá, is a quite old university. It was founded more than 500 years ago. It's also a UNESCO heritage site, so it's a beautiful city, so everybody's welcome. And I would like also to introduce the members of the group and the people who have contributed to some of the results that I'm presenting here. So the members of the group are Professor Manuel Temprado, Professor Pedro Brañacoto from the CSIC, also Professor Mónica Moral, which is living now in the University of Jaén in Spain, and Professor Raúl Palmeiro, and also Professor Obis Castaño is Emeritus Professor of the university. We have two PhD students, Meritxell Malagarriga and Edgar Miranda. And also we have a strong collaboration with Alejandro Jodra, which was a a PhD student in the group. Also, some other results are part of the work that the former members of the RESMO group have been done in the last years, and also mention some international collaborations that are important for these results. Okay, so as I told you, we are especially interested in the control of photo-induced processes, or processes taking place in the excited states. And this is what we call mechano-photochemistry. But we also explore some properties of the ground state, because, of course, they are important to describe the whole process taking place in the excited states. So the outline of my talk will be, I will do a brief introduction, mostly a computational view of the mechanochemical problems. And I will separate the results into sections, because the forces are completely different, or the nature of the forces are different when dealing with ball milling and when dealing with what is called covalent mechanochemistry, where the forces are controlled in a atomic level. And finally, I will give you some conclusions. So it's possible to divide the mechanochemical processes in bulk mechanochemistry. For instance, ball milling is maybe the most representative way of applying these forces. In this kind of mechanochemistry, the mechanical impacts of some materials, some balls in this case, produce some changes, or may induce some chemical changes. This kind of approach has some advantages respect, let's say, classical or more usual ways of doing, for instance, synthesis, because it's possible to use less solvent, even to avoid the use of solvent. Maybe the ball milling process produce new chemical reactions, or maybe just fast reactions with higher chemical yields. So this is because it's also used at the industrial level. So this kind of approach is very useful and quite common now nowadays in many experimental labs. And on the other hand, we have what we can call covalent mechanochemistry, where the forces are applied at the atomic level and a very specific or controlled way. These are some examples, for instance, using AFM to induce, in this case, a Diels-Alder reaction, using mechanical force to promote, or other possibilities to use force proofs. In this case, the proof is a molecular photoswitch that has two states, and these two states produce a different tension, a different force in the reactant, in the mechanophore, and eventually this mechanophore can yield with different rate constant a given chemical reaction. Also, it's possible to use sonication using polymers, some type of polymers, or for instance, polymer mechanochemistry in solid states, where the mechanophore is embedded in the polymer chain, and it's possible to apply a macroscopic force inducing, for instance, in this case, a chemical reaction that is associated with a change in the color of the system. Okay, so how we understand, or how it's possible to understand in terms of potential energy surfaces this process. So in this scheme, we have a very simple schematic process where we have a minimum, a transition state, and of course, if we know the properties of these two structures, we can determine the activation energy, and with the activation energy, it's possible, of course, to predict or to estimate the rate constant of the process. But if we apply a force, for instance, in this case, a constant force, the same force along the reaction path, the structure are displaced. The response of the system to the force is to accommodate to these new forces, and the minimum and the transition state is displaced according to that the forces, the sum of the forces is 0 to find the new equilibrium structures. So this provoke a variation in the activation energy, but this structural variation of the activation energy is, in most of the cases, is not the most important parameter, because we have to take into account the work developed by the forces along the reaction path. So this term usually is responsible for the larger variation of the activation energy or the relative energy, for instance, of reactants and products. Here we have another scheme where this potential energy curve without external force or without any mechanical input. So if we apply a force along this reaction coordinate, the shape of the potential surfaces is changing. Sorry, is the opposite. The green one is without force. So if we apply a force, we have to add to the Hamiltonian the work term. If the force is constant, it's just the scalar product of these two vectors, and it's possible to compute this work. And this work has to be added to the surface, so to the curve, in this case, to the energy curve. And it could be possible, in principle, it could be possible to change, for instance, the relative stability of reactants and products, to change also the activation energy of the process. Of course, the geometry of the different stationary points is changing. It's not exactly the transition state. It is no longer exactly the same, or the minimum reactants and products. So in general, what we have is that the external force reshapes all the potential energy surface. And this can produce many changes, as I told. Even it's possible to open new pathways of reaction or avoid, let's say, a normal reaction pathway. So from a computational point of view, there are two possible strategies to include these forces. One of them is including this as implicitly, so through constraints. And the other one is including the forces explicitly, so including to the Hamiltonian, and this is especially useful to find new saddle points, minima transition state, also for reaction path, and especially for molecular dynamics. So now I'm going to focus on ball milling, and specifically on a model that we have recently developed, to a very simple model to obtain, let's say, some qualitative results regarding the predictions on the variation of the activation energy. So our idea was, it's possible to describe the ball milling process, or more specifically, the effect of the mechanical forces on the chemical reactivity in ball milling conditions, just by taking the molecules and considering some kind of forces. So this is what we try, and I'm going to explain it with a very simple system. This is norbornadiene and quadricycline. In fact, this is not an experimental system. I mean, there are no results for this system. It's just a model system, a toy model. So this system is an endothermic reaction. So the quadricycline is higher in energy. It has a transition state that is well known. And in fact, the potential surfaces are more like this. This system is relevant for molecular solar thermal systems. So it involves excited states. But in any case, if we take the reactant, we can consider, if this is the molecule, schematically is a molecule, we can consider a type of forces. These type of forces are wall type forces. So they are compressing the molecule in a given spatial direction. So these forces are the forces that we are considering in this model. Of course, we need to consider all possible directions, spatial directions. And in order to do this, let's take an example. This direction is given by this vector n, so it's defined by theta and phi coordinates. So this vector defines these two planes that are responsible for the compressing forces, these wall-type forces. Okay, so the magnitude of these forces is given by the experimental conditions. So we took we calculate these forces taking into account the pressure that is reached in the impact of the balls with the material. So if we assume that is in the range of gigapascals, so 1 gigapascal is, let's say, quite representative. So if we know the cross-section area of the molecule, it's straightforward to determine the magnitude of the forces applied to the system. Okay, so with this kind of forces, of very simple forces, we can apply also well-known mechanochemical model, the Bell model, that computes the work developed by these forces along a reaction path. So the activation energy is known. This is the activation energy of the process without any kind of external force or mechanical force. And it's possible to determine this mechanical force as a function of theta and phi as the integral along the reaction path from minimum to transition state of the work developed by the forces in each atom of the molecule. So this summation is for each atom of the molecule. So we can predict the variation in the activation energy for each direction. Okay, so if we consider all possible directions, it's possible to construct a grid of directions to make this integration basically a summation, a sum of different over a given grid, and we get this map where we see that some directions, for instance, in this direction, the activation energy is lowered significantly, and other directions are not useful to reduce the activation energy. Of course, it's possible to make the grid finer, so it's possible to get a very smooth function and determine this activation energy as a function of the spatial direction of the applied forces. We apply it to some experimentally measured systems. For instance, in this case, is a Diels-Alder reaction, where there are two possible products, endo and exo products. And also it's known that the reverse process is not mechanochemically allowed. So if we compare the endo-Diels-Alder reaction, we see that there are regions which are quite efficient in reducing the activation energy, but for instance, for the retro-Diels-Alder reaction, it remains basically unaffected. It's very close to zero. So, of course, this is in line with the fact, that the reverse reaction is not mechanochemically allowed. This model is available for everyone who wants to use it in any problem. It's very easy to use because since the model is so simple, you just need the structure of the minimum of the transition state and just an input file with 3 lines, 3 data. So the geometry files is a standard geometry, just the number of atoms and the atomic number and coordinates XYZ for each atom, and the input file is just the external pressure, so 1 gigapascal, for instance, the grid, the integration grid resolution, 100 is quite enough, and if we want to include or to use the van der Waals radii for the calculation of the cross section. Okay, so in thermal activated reaction, we have an activation energy, and with the activation energy, it's possible to predict the reaction rates of the process in mechanochemically activated chemical reaction with ball milling. We instead have this map of activation energy as a function of theta phi, and we need a kinetic model, and we are actually working on it. So I will just present this result regarding the ball milling and excited states, specifically triplet state. These are unpublished results. So we are trying to apply this model also to the excited states to know what's the effect of ball milling, of the impact in the excited state of the molecules. And triplet energy is an interesting property, an interesting state, because it's relevant for many applications, of course, in solution, but also in principle could be relevant, and there are some only a few results, but as long as I know, some results regarding especially photocatalysis, sorry. So what we do now is to apply to the prediction of the excited states is to consider again the same kind of forces, but in this case, we need to evaluate the deformation of the molecule and how it responds to this external force. With this new geometry for its possible impact, we have a variation in the triplet energy. For instance, we can have a blue shift of the triplet energy, or in other direction, we can have a red shift. It's possible to integrate all this data to produce a profile of the triplet energy for a given external pressure related to the impact of the balls in the ball milling. Okay, so these are 2 examples. This is acetone, which is a classical donor, triplet donor in photosensitized reactions. And in this case, what we see here is the spectrum, let's say the spectrum at 1 gigapascal of the molecule. So it's seen that that there is only a minimal response of the system of the triplet energy to the external pressure. And in fact, if we see the spectrum along for different external pressures, we see that the spectrum basically remains unchanged. This is another example, cyclotatetraene, which is known to be very efficient acceptor, triplet energy acceptor. And the situation is now different. This molecule has a very large response to mechanical action. So the triplet energy changes quite a lot. And as we see, there are variations of up to, let's say, 5-6 kilocal per mole respect the normal, the vertical excitation. Okay, we are applying this model also to other excited state processes, but okay, and now I will present also just few examples of what we have been doing in the last years regarding the, let's say, covalent mechano-photochemistry, so the control of excited state processes with mechanical forces. But in this case, these forces are applied in a very specific way, in a very controlled way. So the idea is to control the photoreactivity, or to explore if it is possible to control the photoreactivity with forces. So on one side, we focus on energy gap. Energy gap involves many processes like absorption, emission, energy or charge transfer. So we focus on finding optimal forces and using complete potential surfaces to get precise information on this response. And on the other hand, the photoreactivity. So what's the effect of mechanical forces, or can mechanical forces modify some specific aspects, very relevant aspect of photoreactivity, like conical intersections, the shape of the conical intersection, which is extremely useful or important for predicting the photoproducts of the reaction. Also the effect on reaction paths, and also to simulate and perform non-adiabatic molecular dynamics. So yeah, we saw how these forces can affect the conical intersections, and for instance, to predict the dynamical behavior of these systems under mechanical effect. So just to illustrate these two aspects, I saw here different examples. So regarding the excitation, so the absorption spectrum, we saw that it was possible for some system, in this case is the pyrene system, that some bands can respond, some excitations can respond to mechanical forces, but eventually other excitations are not so sensitive sensible to mechanical forces. Also, the forces affect to the energy transfer process. So in this case was triplet energy transfer. Also the excitation energy for triplet and singlet, in this case is the retinal molecule. And we also saw that the fluorescence and the lifetime of some systems, in this case it was a steel beam molecule, are affected by mechanical forces. And on the other hand, regarding the photoreactivity, it's possible to show that the forces can improve, for instance, the optimization of molecular solar thermal systems, that they affect the photoisomerization quantum yield. So it changes this quantum yield also in an unexpected way. And it can control, the forces can control the photoproducts and also the excited state lifetime and quantum yields. Okay, so just one example for the control of basically excitation energy. So we have developed different models, but I will explain a very simple model here to predict the mechanical response of a chromophore to mechanical forces. So if we do a quadratic approximation of the potential surfaces, it's possible to determine the excitation energy as a function of the internal coordinates. And it's possible to predict or to quantify the effect of an external force in the excitation energy. Okay, so this is the response of the change in the structure of a molecule, a chromophore, under the action of an external force. But we were especially interested in optimal forces. For optimal forces, we mean forces with the minimum possible magnitude provoking the largest variation in the energy gap. So to do it, it's necessary to do a constraint optimization. I will go fast in the details, but this is just usual Lagrange optimization with a constraint, which is that the energy gap is constant. So all points in this scheme given by this curve in black have the same excitation energy. So we look for the minimum possible force provoking this variation. So it's possible to get the optimal structure, and it's also possible to get the optimal force. And this optimal force, this optimal force, this is an example, is in general a complex vector. So here we have an example of the excitation x0 to s1 of semi-bulbalin. And this is the optimal force. And usually it's complicated to understand how to apply it from a practical point of view. So one possibility is to project this vector in terms of force pairs. In this case, it's possible to identify that this force pair applied in these specific atoms change the energy gap more efficiently. We also develop an algorithm that explore the complete potential surfaces, and it's no using just the quadratic approximation, but is exploring without any limitation the complete potential surface. And one interesting thing is that it's possible to quantify the limits of the mechanical response of a given excitation, a given energy gap. For instance, here S1 is 0. So it provides the limits where the molecule is constrained. So we can identify some molecule has more response, more mechanical response than other chromophore. Okay, and finally, to show you some an example of control of mechanical control of photoreactivity. I will put this example. So retinal is a chromophore present in rhodopsins. It's a protein, a transmembrane protein present in mammals, responsible for the vision, but also present in other in other systems. So the retinal suffers a cis-to-trans photoisomerization upon absorption of a photon in the visible spectrum. So we use a model of this chromophore and applied a pair of forces, specific forces to this system, and study what was happening with the photoisomerization. And let's see if it works. Oops. Oh, here. No. Okay, sorry. So this is non-adiabatic molecular dynamic simulation. And this, I will put it again. We see that the system is isomerizing along around this double bond. So this is photoisomerization from trans to cis. And what we saw in this case is that the quantum yield of the photoisomerization increases with increasing forces, which is quite unexpected because the force applied on the trans isomer is somehow opposing to the cis isomerization, which is more shrink. But the explanation is maybe quite technical, but it's, in any case, it's surprising that it's possible to control the photoisomerization quantum yield, and also that the response is, at least in some cases, is not expected. So these methodologies are also implemented in Open MOLCAS and MOLCAS 8. So the module for applying forces and also to perform the integration of time-dependent Schrodinger equation with forces, and everything is done with this software. Okay, so just to finish, some conclusions regarding ball milling. The simple model that we have developed can describe, at least qualitatively, the effect of mechanical forces. I mean, specifically the mechanical work, the effect of the mechanical work in the reactivity. And also what we saw is that excited states may significantly be affected by these kind of forces. And regarding mechano-photochemistry, the covalent mechano-photochemistry, we saw that we have results supporting that the photophysical properties can be effectively modulated with mechanical forces, absorption, emission, energy, electron transfer. And also photoreactivity can be modified. So it affects, I didn't explain, but it affects the conical-intersection topology, also could affect the quantum yield of the process, and also the general reaction pathways. So we think that new models are necessary. So it's still a lot of work to do in this area to understand, probably with easy models that can extract information in an easy way from these setups, these experimental setups. And yeah, I hope that we could contribute in some way to these challenges. So just to finish, acknowledgments. So to all the people that has contributed, the small group members, and also the collaborations and the funding from the Ministerio de Ciencia y Innovación and the University of Alcalá. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We have a few questions from the audience. First, do you have any thoughts about how to include the crystalline structure of reagents in your ball milling model?
Yeah, it's a good question. We are focused now at the molecular level because, yeah, crystals. In fact, we are trying to model these systems, these more realistic systems, by using small clusters of. So trying to study not just two molecules, but more complex systems. But yeah, this is, let's say, the straightforward way to study now this kind of systems.
There's a similar question with maybe with a specific extension. Is there an extension to treat bimolecular reactions?
Yeah, in fact, I mean, most of the reactions are bimolecular reactions. So yeah, it's necessary to describe the adduct. So the adduct is quite relevant because we have to assume that the molecules are in contact. So they are ready to react. Otherwise, it's impossible. If they are not mixed, it's not possible to consider any mechanical effect. So the adduct is the starting point, let's say, and yeah, and then the work is compute using the kind of forces.
Okay. On a different topic, you showed that you can refine the grid or mesh in the calculations as much as desired. Does this affect the accuracy of the calculations or only how long it takes?
No, it takes just seconds. So it doesn't matter if it's 100 or 500 points, and it's extremely stable, even with just with the first grid we saw that I saw is enough to get a quite accurate result. But I mean, it's inexpensive from a computational point of view, because it's just a scalar multiplication, so it's a dot product.
All right. So you mentioned near the end of the presentation that the result you obtained was somewhat unexpected. Can you explain more about why it's unexpected? And do you have any hypotheses about what might be going on?
Yeah, I mean, this photoisomerization of the retinal molecule, I say that it's unexpected because cis conformer, cis isomer is more restricted. It has so the trans isomer is more expanded. So in principle, these kind of forces, one may thought that are opposed to the cis isomerization, but this is related with the point where the system goes to the ground state. So it's moving on the excited state, and these points of hoping to the ground state are these dots in blue, these blue dots. So the key question is the movement of the dihedral of the torsion related to the dihedral angle, and also this second dihedral that is marked in red. So if they are in phase, the movement is in phase, it make more probable to complete the photoisomerization. So it seems that the forces are providing this coherence in the motion. And yeah, this is the let's say simple explanation for that.
Great. All right, well, let's wrap up with one last question. This person mentioned, thank you very much for sharing your 3D activation model with the research community on GitHub. Can you let us know if it can handle any molecules or what its limitations are?
Yeah, in principle, it's thought for molecular systems. So it's in principle should be relatively small systems. It probably is not at least straightforward applied to for instance polymers or something like this. But if you have some molecular reactants, it can be applied without straightforward. I mean, it's just to take the structure of the minimum, the transition state, and it computes the work along the reaction path.
Excellent. All right, well, thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Professor Frutos, for that outstanding presentation. And thank you so much for joining us. Just a reminder, we've had an amazing group of speakers over the past few years as part of the mechanochemistry discussions, and we encourage you to check them all out on the YouTube channel. We also are interested in your feedback. Please feel free to use the QR code here or the link at the end of the seminar to provide feedback on how we might improve the mechanochemistry discussions even more. Lastly, we have a great group of upcoming speakers planned in the months ahead, and we hope that you will join us for all of them. Thank you very much.